Welcome to Session 4. This session is an extension of the material that we covered last week. It focuses primarily on the identification of problems that curricula can resolve. It is Part 2 of the Needs Assessment. It is important at the Needs Assessment stage to engage representatives from various stakeholder groups who have something to gain or potentially lose as a result of the future development of your curriculum. By doing this, you are allowing those who have a stake in the process to find solutions to an identified problem. One important but often overlooked stakeholder group in curriculum development is the learners. In order to create curriculum that is truly student-centered, you will want to seek out learners as collaborators in the development of your curriculum. Also, if you're working in an environment that values patient-centeredness or family-centeredness, you may want to include patient representatives or family representatives on your curriculum development team. By involving these key stakeholders in your development process, you will be able to build relationships and foster curriculum buy-in among those who have a stake in the issue or problem that your curriculum will address. As mentioned, a key stakeholder group in curriculum development is the learners that your curriculum will target. It is crucial at the needs assessment phase to find out from these learners what their previous training and scope of knowledge is on the given topic. What skills do they think they need to learn on the topic, their perceived deficiencies and needs in the area, their general attitudes towards the curricular topic, as well as their desired learning styles and methods. For example, as a curriculum developer, you may be leaning towards the development of an online curriculum. However, after speaking to or surveying the targeted learners, you may discover that they prefer face-to-face rather than online learning. As such, this will have huge implications for how you develop your curriculum. At the needs assessment stage, you will also want to gain an understanding of the environment in which you will be implementing the curriculum. Specifically, are there specific tensions, trends, or philosophies that you should be embracing in the development of your curriculum? Another question to consider is whether or not your curriculum will impact other stakeholders in the training environment. For example, will it place increased teaching demands on faculty? Will it overshadow other curricular initiatives that have been developed? It is important to recognize the answers to these types of questions at the onset to minimize any potential pushback that you may receive as you try to implement your new curriculum. In addition, you may have to develop train-the-trainer activities to go alongside your curriculum if, for example, there are few faculty members who are adequately prepared to teach what you are proposing. Finally, at this point, you will also want to identify any additional barriers that might hinder the development and implementation of your curriculum. For instance, maybe you will need to obtain funding in order to sustain the curriculum, or you will need to get administrative approval from several individuals in your institution before you can begin curriculum development. As part of your targeted needs assessment, you may have to survey, conduct focus groups, or interviews with representatives from your key stakeholder groups. In the presentation folder for this week, I have included some examples of instruments that my team has used in past for targeted curricula needs assessments. I encourage you to review the instruments in this folder after this presentation. I will now provide you with a brief overview of how to develop instruments or data collection tools for a targeted needs assessment. The process that I will be describing over the next few slides works especially well for the development of surveys. However, it can also be used for the development of interviews or focus group guides. As a first step, you will want to review the literature from your general needs assessment, which we discussed last session. This general needs assessment is also what you are developing in assignment 2 for this course. In this general needs assessment, you may identify existing data collection instruments that others have used that you can use or adapt for your own targeted needs assessment. However, if no instruments exist, you can also use your general needs assessment literature to identify possible dimensions to include on the instruments that you will be developing to, for example, survey or interview individuals in your targeted needs assessment. So what is a dimension? Well, a dimension is an abstract idea or underlying theme that you wish to measure using items or questions on a data collection tool. Some dimensions can be relatively simple, which means that you only need a few items or questions in order to operationalize or measure this dimension on your data collection tools. Whereas other dimensions, such as patient satisfaction, may require you to include multiple items or multiple questions on your data collection tools in order to fully tap into or operationalize this particular dimension on your tool. It is important to remember that every item or question on a data collection instrument or tool should link to a specific overarching dimension, and that every dimension on your tool should link back to a major needs assessment question that you are trying to answer as part of your targeted needs assessment, so that there are connections between the items and questions that you include for the participants on your data collection tool and the major needs assessment questions that you are trying to answer. The next step in the development of your data collection instrument for your targeted needs assessment is to develop a blueprint for it. A blueprint provides a basic structure of the data collection instrument. It consists of a list of dimensions that relate to the specific major needs assessment questions that you want to answer in your study. A blueprint ensures that the information that you gather from your stakeholders will enable you to answer your major needs assessment questions. Through the development of a blueprint, you can also shorten your data collection instrument, simply by removing items that do not relate to your major needs assessment questions. For example, sometimes you may want to include certain items on your surveys or interview guides, but find out after the fact that you did not need to include them as they do not assist you in answering your specific major needs assessment questions. A blueprint can also help you establish your general plan for analysis before you begin data collection, because every needs assessment item included on your data collection tool is linked back to a major needs assessment question. So what we've been talking about so far in this presentation has been somewhat abstract. So now what I would like to do is walk you through the development process for the blueprint itself. What I will do is I'm going to show you a blueprint for a survey that I had to develop for a targeted needs assessment. We were developing a curriculum on how to involve caregivers in the assessment of health professionals' non-technical skills. Our major question that was guiding our targeted needs assessment was what health professionals' non-technical skills can caregivers assess? However, in your targeted needs assessment, your major question could be something more general, such as what are the characteristics of the learners who will use your future curriculum? After we identified this major question that would guide our targeted needs assessment, we then reviewed the peer-reviewed literature to find out what dimensions could assist us in answering this particular question. We identified the dimensions of interpersonal sensitivity and communication. That is, the literature showed us that it is possible for caregivers to assess health professionals' interpersonal sensitivity and communication skills. And as such, we wanted to include items on our survey that tapped into these two dimensions. I then used the peer-reviewed literature from my general needs assessment to define these two dimensions. We also consulted stakeholders to ensure that they were okay with these dimensions. These dimensions were then placed on the blueprint. I then brainstormed with my team possible items to include on our survey that would allow us to tap in to each particular dimension. Please note that when you develop your blueprints, you can include more than one item per dimension. I have only included one item for each dimension here for illustration purposes. However, you can include as many survey item examples for each dimension on your survey as you see fit. Lastly, my team and I then decided on the number of closed versus open-ended items to include on our survey for each dimension. Once we then drafted the survey, we then went back and inserted the corresponding survey item numbers for each dimension. So you will not be able to complete this corresponding survey item column of your blueprint until you have a draft survey developed. However, this blueprint guided us in the analysis of our needs assessment survey data because we knew specifically what items on our data collection instrument, our survey, related to the dimensions and what dimensions linked back to our major needs assessment questions. Using the above example as a guide, I now encourage you to develop a blueprint for a survey or interview guide that you would like to use as part of your targeted needs assessment for the curriculum that you're developing for assignments 2 to 4, or for another ongoing project that you may be involved in. I have included a blueprint template for you in the learning activity area on Brightspace. If you run into any challenges in developing your blueprint, please email me or post a note on Brightspace. I can also review your blueprint for you and provide you with some formative feedback. Have an excellent week.